And I looked to my left, and there was my father dressed as a Pennsylvania farmer.
So he went back there, too?
Well, he went back there, but he had left East Hanover on a previous day, but had been sent to the same day in history, November 19th of 1863.
Was he looking for you?
At that time, no. He had been sent there earlier, so he couldn't have been briefed on my later arrival to the same day. And I looked over at him and said, "Dad, what are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm not your father, son. You must be mistaken."
He
I thought,
played it that close to his
Well,
breast.
see, his training was kicking, and he was thinking, boy, if Andy's here, and he looks several years older than he does back at the house back in 1967 or whenever he had been sent, I better act like I'm not even his father. So my dad, made sure that he didn't alert any of the people around him that, in fact, his son was there as well, recognizing him as being there, which is certainly a strange event. I was very disconcerted about this because here I'm in 1863 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, being aware of the momentous event that is about to occur with President Lincoln giving his famous address there. And I thought this is very disconcerting. So I walked away from my dad over to the left side of the dais. And there were two ladies, young ladies, dressed in their Sunday best, kind of gossiping at me behind their fans. They were sort of saying, well, look at this little carpetbagger. Look at the Union jacket he has on, and look at those men's shoes. They must have thought I was a carpetbagger who had collected my clothing off of the battlefield, because they couldn't have comprehended that I would have been given back by Mr. Burns.
And maybe an orphan or something.
Right, an orphan, maybe a deserter from a Union regiment. But they were certainly paying attention to me. And in my training, I had been coached to always avoid scrutiny, because scrutiny might result in becoming captive. And if we were captured, they might have difficulty extracting us from a location in the past or future. So again, my training kicked in, and I moved to another location to the center of the dais, the left corner of the dais. And there were two Union officers. I was questioned by them about where my regiment was and what my regiment was and where I was bivouacked. And I remember saying, "What's bivouac, sir?" And they laughed hysterically. So here was more scrutiny that I realized I should avoid. So I thought, this is really strange. My dad's here. Some of the civilians of Gettysburg are noticing me. Now 2 Union officers who must be guards for President Lincoln have noticed my presence, and they're wondering why this Union bugle boy is there without his regiment, dressed sort of haphazardly at that. Yeah. So I decided, my training kicked in, and even though at that point I really sort of wanted to see Abraham Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address, I decided to walk about 200 paces on a diagonal away from the dais. And because I was, walking along in these grossly oversized shoes, sort of like shuffling along, I wanted to conceal the size of the shoes so I wouldn't attract any more notice. So I held my left foot forward and my right foot to the side, and I looked in the opposite direction from the Wills Hotel where Lincoln would soon be arriving. And it was in that strange posture, dressed in the clothing that John Lawrence Burns gave me, wearing grossly oversized men's shoes, as a time traveler from 1972 in DARPA's Project Pegasus, that I was photographed in the photograph that until last year was the sole surviving photograph to show President Lincoln at Gettysburg on the day that he gave the address there. That's known as the Josephine Cobb image of Lincoln at Gettysburg.
How did you know that was you?
I knew it was me because as the project was winding down in 1971-72 timeframe, when we were still in New Jersey, had not yet moved to Southern California in November of 1972, I found that image in a contemporary news magazine. I don't know whether it was an old issue or a 1970, 71, 72 issue. I believe it was Life magazine. It may have been Look. It may have been the Sunday New York Times magazine supplement. But I was paging through a stack of magazines that a neighbor of ours had given to my mother, and my sister and I were out in the front stoop paging through these magazines, and I found that image. And I thought, my God, that's me at Gettysburg. There I am standing with my feet askew so nobody would notice the grossly oversized shoes. It must have been a Saturday or probably a Sunday, because I then took that magazine into the house. My dad was reading the paper, and I said, "Dad, look, they got an image of me at Gettysburg." And he said, "Yep." I said, "Is that me?" And he said, "Yep, but just don't talk about it." So from that point forward, I have lived with the awareness that the only photograph until, as I said, in 2008, I think it was, to show Lincoln at Gettysburg also contains an image of me as a time traveler from the future.
Was there some interest with Project Pegasus and the Civil War period? I mean, it seemed like they sent a lot of people there.
Yeah, actually, I had 3 encounters with the Civil War. The first chronovisor probe that I went to from the General Manufacturing Company facility in Convent Station, New Jersey, in fall of 1970, set me actually into a Civil War battle where I was overtaken by Confederate forces, and I was actually hiding beneath a berm, and Confederate soldiers were leaping over my location. And I was terrified that I might be bayoneted or something, but of course we couldn't be harmed during the chronovisor probes because we weren't there fully physically. So that was the first encounter with the Civil War. The second were the chronovisor probes in New Mexico in summer of 1971, where they kept on sending me back to the Lincoln assassination site to try to walk up the stairs and get into his balcony location to see who shot him. Because, again, they were testing the existence of the multiverse. I guess they were wondering whether John Wilkes Booth shot him or Major Rathbone or perhaps Mrs. Lincoln. And so I was sent there 4 or 5 times, and slightly different things happened. But, of course, Ford's Theater was always there, and Abraham Lincoln ended up getting shot every time they sent me there. But, for example, when I would walk through the lobby, maybe somebody would pass me at a different angle. Maybe a gentleman who'd been talking to a lady was actually talking to 2 ladies on another probe. So there were these slight changes in the scenario, but very minor ones. And each time, unfortunately, President Lincoln died there that night. The third, of course, was the trip to Gettysburg in spring of 1972. I don't think they were using time travel technology to scrutinize the Civil War. Okay. I think the explanation for this focus on the Civil War was basically that it provided an excellent background, an excellent time and place against which to experiment with time travel technology. For one thing, they had a 100-year accumulation of the works of major American historians describing the great battles and events during the Civil War. So when they sent us somewhere, they knew what was going to be occurring on that day in that location. And I think another reason they may have been focusing on the Civil War so much is that because they were utilizing children in at least a major part of their time travel experiments, they wanted to send us to a time when it would be normal for children to be by themselves, to be dislocated from their families, to be wandering the countryside, and to be involved in adult activities, for example, as Union bugle boys and drummers and so forth. So I think it was really germane to their goals in time travel experimentation rather than any particular interest that they had in the Civil War.
Did they tell you, Andy, not to get involved in, messing up past events?
Absolutely. We received essentially a whole afternoon of lecture that essentially imparted to us the prime directive of Star Trek fame of when they were sending us not to another planet, of course, but to another point in the time-space continuum. We were absolutely instructed to never pick up anything unnecessarily, never move something, never try to intervene necessarily to change an event, never to take anything back with us. We were there just to be observers and to essentially be able to report back to them what we saw in a particular point in time.
Remarkable story, truly.
So they were concerned about the butterfly effect and the thought that, well, what if we told something to somebody that then resulted in discovery that altered the timeline in the future and so forth. We were there just to really observe and not interfere and make sure that there was really no alteration of the timeline beyond our presence there. But I must say that they found, as was discussed by the project administrator when they shut down time travel to the past via chronovisor at the Sandia Auditorium in the middle of the first summer of 1971, and this is virtually a direct quote, he said, "Listen, gentlemen, every time we send the same child or a different child to the same past event, it changes, maybe a little bit, but it changes. And therefore, while we're gathering intelligence data about past events, it's not reliable because it's changing." So the very act of sending the same child or a different child to the same quote-unquote event was, I guess, as a result of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, changing that event a little bit.
Would you go back again? Do you miss that?
I don't really miss time traveling to the past. I think I would certainly probably teleport again, although that was sort of terrifying. I think if I had the opportunity to teleport, I would probably try to undertake an important mission, because it was stressful to go back and encounter a past time and then be extracted from that location and have to cope with my normal life again. I think if I was to go back in time again, it would be to approach Thomas Alva Edison in 1884, right before Nikola Tesla emigrated to this country. And I would urge Thomas Edison to view Nikola Tesla as a protege to be mentored and not as a competitor to be undermined. Because if there had been a better relationship between Edison and Tesla, I think we'd be living in a much better world today.
Edison could have helped him a lot.
He could have, certainly. And he was concerned. You know, he brought Tesla over when Tesla had solved an engineering problem that Edison had posted a $50,000 reward for. In fact, Edison actually welched on that reward and didn't financially remunerate Tesla. And Tesla had financial problems during the rest of his life. So when Westinghouse and Edison teamed up and sabotaged the career of Nikola Tesla, we really entered a more negative timeline than we would have if the works of Tesla had become dominant and had defined the 20th century in the way that I think they're going to define the 21st century.